Well, hey, you, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Hippie Podcast. I'm your host, Michaela, here with my corgis per usual. And today is what I'm going to call a foundational episode, meaning it's one of the episodes I'm going to use and going to continue to refer back to as people enter my world and enter my sphere, because in everything that we do, there is always a foundation. And when we try to build something without a foundation, whether it's a house, a habit, or anything else in our lives, when the weight gets to be too much to bear, everything we have built will crumble. However, when we have a solid foundation, that thing, whatever it is, a habit, a house, can withstand the test of time and can bear more weight than something without a foundation. And so what gave me the inspiration for this episode is a couple of things. One, I grew up building houses with my dad, so the foundation thing has always been a thing. Two, with horses, we always have a foundation. And you can tell how solid a horse's foundation is because that foundation that you lay in the first 30, 60, 90 days of a horse's training are going to be the habits they have for the rest of their life. So someone who is really handy can get a horse with a bad foundation, and while they can make that horse better, the horse is always going to have some of those habits that it developed in the first 30, 60, 90 days of training. So this is a very small example. One of my friends had started a horse for the first time, and she had said, I don't want to teach her to flex her head until she's older. And I told her, I'm like, you're actually just training her to be stiff, because if you don't teach her how to be flexible, because flexibility in a horse's neck is really important. I said, if you don't teach her how to be flexible, you're not training her. You're going to be fighting through the habit of stiffness. And this is the same philosophy, the same concept that we are laying here today. We don't want to be riding through, literally and metaphorically, a habit of stiffness. We want to develop flexibility in that foundation from the beginning. So that was the second thing that really inspired this episode. And the third thing, and this is more of a, in film school, you have a one, you've seen one, or you have act one, and then you have act 2A, and then act 2B. I feel like this is like an act 2B because it was really inspired by this foundational concept in horse training. Is as I have learned how to rewire my subconscious brain, as I have learned to release trapped emotions and do this emotional development and spiritual, I really want to come up with a new word for all of this stuff, but for lack of a better term, like spiritual development, whatever you want to call it, it's became very clear to me, similar to horse training, we have to have a foundation, that the way that we go through things is actually very important. And so the two pieces of foundation that I've been working on laying in my own life is safety, nervous system regulation, and then two, just building a belief. I'm going to get into a separate episode. But with all of that being said, one of the things that's really important, whether you're learning from me or whether you're learning from someone else, is you need to know their values. Because if someone is seeing the world through a different lens than you are, it's just going to clash. It's not going to work. And our values, to me, along with our identity and other things, is the GPS coordinates that are getting us to where we want to go. So if someone is using different GPS coordinates than you are, you do not want to follow them because they're going to lead you to places that you don't want to go. So it's really important to me that you are very clear on my values, so you can make sure, yes, I know Michaela's values. I want to continue to learn from Michaela, and to be very clear that you know your own values and that we are either aligned or we're not. And if we're not aligned, you're not wrong, I'm not wrong, you're not right, I'm not right. It's just we're going on different paths. And so one of these values for me, and I'm going to add a little bit more of a backstory here right now. This is the reason that I started learning from longevity and biohacking doctors and not mainstream medical doctors, because their GPS coordinates, their goal that's getting them to where they want to go, is to not just live a long time, but live very healthy a long time. So it wasn't just about staying alive. It was about being alive. And so I started learning from doctors because they were literally looking at problems through a different lens. They were putting in different GPS coordinates to get them to where they want to go, where mainstream medical doctors, they're going to try to keep you alive, but not necessarily well, alive, and thriving. So I quit learning my health advice from mainstream media medical doctors because it is more important to me to not just live a long time, but to live very well and to be alive and not just alive. So that's just an example. And that's what I want you to start looking at. And whoever you're learning from, I want you to just start asking, do they have similar values of mine? Because people will give themselves away in their own dialogue. And two, are they going a direction that I want to go? Or are they just saying things, but they're not actually anywhere that I want to be? Because this is all really important. Again, we're not out here to make anyone right or wrong. We're just making sure we are walking the path that is right for us. And so now, all of that being said, I want to get into how we think is greater than what we think. So this is a huge goal of mine, and everything that I do and teach, every podcast I record, every YouTube video I record, every teaching that I do, I don't want to just tell you what to think. I don't want to just tell you what to do. I want to teach you how to evaluate the situation, how to think critically about it, and then come up and make a decision for yourself. Side note, if you want me to ever do a better job at that, you have permission to send me an email, Michaela@michaelamay.com, and say, hey, Michaela, you need to do a little bit more of the how and not just the what here. Totally have my permission to do that, because I always want to be pushing myself on that, because I don't want you to, with some of the things that I do, like with dog health, right? I don't want you to have to call me. If you need to learn something new, we always need to learn new things. We always need to learn a new tool, but I want you to know how to evaluate your dog and realize, like, oh, it's this system that's having an issue. And whenever this system is having an issue, we need to address it with this solution. That's how I want you to be able to evaluate whether it's a horse, a dog, or yourself, is to know. Because one of the things, and I'm not going to get fully off on this tangent today, but I believe that the overcomplication of our medical system is a fear tactic, because if it's overcomplicated, we will, and I actually think this is the reason that medical school is so long, is because, and again, I'm not talking like surgeries and all of those things, but as I'm helping people with their dogs who have cancer, there's all these different names for cancer, and it all comes back to the same root cause. So a way that I can explain this a little bit better is in Chinese medicine, they would never say like, oh, you have IBD, IBS. They wouldn't have 7 different names for a stomach issue. They would say something like, oh, you're damp in your intestinal, like, we need to, you have a little bit of phlegm, which is dampness, so we need to add heat. They would never give you 10 different diagnoses. They would say, oh, this is imbalanced, that's giving you that symptom, here's how we balance it back in. And that is really how simple the body is. And so I want you to feel confident and have the tools to feel equipped, like, oh, I may need to learn more things, but as a general rule, I know these systems of the body. I know if these systems of the body are off, I can approach it with this, or that. That is my goal, because I don't want you, if you're ever in a situation, I don't want you to have to rely on anybody, and that becomes the thing that is do or die for you or your animal. I want you to have the tools, like, again, a minor example, but I want you to know that if your animal ever gets into something poisonous, or if they have a really bad stomach bug that seems like food poisoning, give them activated coconut charcoal, because that will absorb the poison. I don't want you to ever be in a point like, I don't know what to do, my dog just ate something it shouldn't have. Give it activated charcoal, right? You have the confidence, you have the tools, and you're well equipped. That is my goal. Because one of the things that I learned in 2020 when we were, and even now when we were experiencing a ton of media confusion, is people would just say, like, the words that came through for me is, don't believe blindly, discern deliberately. My spiritual teacher, my meditation teacher at the time, was really teaching us the power of discernment. And it's like, does this make sense? Does it sound good, or is it actually good? Because those can be two totally and completely different things. And that's why I want to teach you how to think and not just what to think. Because when we just memorize and just know what to think, we're believing things blindly. When we have discernment, when we can discern deliberately, now this is getting us on the path of how we are thinking. Can we make things make sense? Because if we don't have control over our mind, and this is a lesson I've been learning very hardcore the last 3 years, if we do not have control over our mind, we don't have control over our life. If we don't have control over our emotions, which control the mind, we don't have control over our life. And so it's all of these things, and it's even knowing when our emotions can get in the way. We can use the mind to say like, oh, pause. Pause, honey. Pause, honey. Let's breathe. Let's breathe. Let's get back into the body. Let's think about this. We don't have to go full force all of the time. And so I want you to just start thinking about what things have you been believing blindly. Question them, challenge them. My favorite thing is just take it to court. Is there evidence that supports this belief, or do you actually have more evidence that disproves this belief? And start doing what I call a thought audit. And this is the whole point of taking them to court, is you start auditing your thoughts, and the thoughts that look a little suspicious, we take to court. We put them on trial. Does this make sense? Does this not make sense? Do I have evidence to support it? Do I have evidence that does not actually support it? And then we start going through these thoughts, and then a lot of times it's best to start on paper, and then you can start to just do it in real time. For me, sometimes even just going on a drive because I feel really relaxed when I'm driving. And so I feel like I can start to, kind of do these things just as I'm driving. And so I do this mostly like as I'm driving, like, that actually doesn't make sense. And again, with things you're seeing on social media, with things you're hearing about, ask yourself, why do I even believe this in the first place? Is this my thought? Is this my belief? Or did I just adopt it from somebody else? Because this is something I learned from Tony Robbins, and it's been so powerful in my life, is he who is most certain will always come out on top. So he, she, whoever will always come out on top. And a lot of people are very, very certain of their own bullshit. It's not the truth. It's the certainty that makes us believe and think that is true, that it is whatever they're saying is true, but it's not actually true. It's just their certainty. And so if someone says bullshit with a lot of certainty, we're more likely to believe it. And so it really comes down to we have to tap back into our gut, and we have to know how to question and challenge things. And so this is why this is a foundational episode, because even as I'm teaching, I want you to go through, because I'm going to do my best to always tell you the why, how I came to those conclusions. I'm human. So I want you to be able to question and challenge these things. Okay, Michaela is saying to do it this way. This makes sense. And then also back it up with your own evidence. So that's the thing that I have come to the point of. I establish what I call my bumper lanes. So I establish what I call my bumper lanes, meaning if I go too much over here, we might get past the point of rescue. And if I go too much over here, I might get past the point of rescue. And I never want to get myself into a situation where I'm past the point of rescue. And so I want to stay within those bumper lanes. So for example, if I'm experimenting with something, I know if I go too far to this bumper lane, it might, and it's not even past the point of rescue all the time. It's like, okay, if I experiment with this supplement, if I take too much of it, I might be vomiting. And if I take too little of it, I might not experience anything. Or if I take too much, it might get somewhere that I don't want to go. So those are my bumper lanes. Once I have those bumper lanes established, I will test theories. So if someone has a supplement, and supplements tend to be pretty safe, but if someone has a supplement or something that they're saying is the best thing since sliced bread, blah, 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 I'll establish my bumper lanes. Okay, if I take too much, this might happen. If I take too little, this might happen. Okay, stay within these two lanes. And then I'm going to go experiment, and I'm going to develop my own belief, and I'm going to develop my own independent studies. My friend and I would call it, what am I seeing? What am I feeling? What am I witnessing? Like, how is this thing working out in real time? Because there are some things, as I'm sure you've learned as well on your journey, not everything that works for one person is going to work for another, and something might be amazing for you and it's not going to work for someone else. So I really have gotten to the point where I don't listen to a ton of data other than to establish my bumper lanes. And then I'm also, and I do have a few episodes on Ozempic and why I decided not to take Ozempic as someone who's quote unquote the perfect candidate. I was presented with Ozempic before, I call it the Ozempic craze. Like, I was presented with Ozempic before this craze took off. And I go back, I'll link that episode below as well, but I go back through and I explain why I ultimately chose not to take Ozempic. And at the time, the data actually looked really good on Ozempic. It looked amazing. Like, it was actually my naturopath who presented it to me. And I told her, I'm like, I'll get back to you. That actually sounds really fascinating. It sounds like it would solve a lot of the issues I'm experiencing. Let me get back to you. I didn't look into any of the data because I knew the data on it was actually really good. And I say really good with, you can't see inside my head, but I'm doing the quotation marks, because if the people that are making the product are paying for the data to get done, well, we've got some questions. And so we had a lot of questions. So what I ended up doing was I went and I sat in within my gut and was like, is this the best thing for me to do? And the answer was no. It was not the best thing for me to do. And so I went with my gut. And even now, there's a ton of people that are thinking Ozempic is amazing. And again, go back to my episode because I talk about my kryptonite. And if I was to do anything, it would probably be try this Ozempic stuff or a GLP-1 or any of the peptides. And when I intuitively check in and when I intuitively feel into my gut, it's continuously a no. And so we have to have that faith and we have to have that belief in ourselves, because the information war, especially with AI, is just going to continue to ramp up. And we have to double down on how we think, and we have to double down on discernment if we want to stay in control over our own minds and therefore in control of our own lives. So this is why this is a foundational episode, because before, if someone's going to take my course, I'm going to refer back to this episode of, I really want you to take a moment to do the thought audits, to find out your values, make sure who you're learning from is taking you to a place that you want to go. Because if they aren't, this is a theme that's been in my life the last couple of months. Like, if you realize you're going the wrong direction, it's okay to turn around. And so with all of that being said, I really appreciate you tuning into this episode of the Western Hippie. I'm really excited about next week's episode. I'm actually editing the episode right now. The interview's already done. Danielle from Detoxify to Purify, and her dog Casey is 18 and a half, coming 19. If I just saw this dog out in the wild, I would think this dog was a very healthy 10-year-old. She is absolutely amazing. And this goes back to our, discerning deliberately, because some of the things Danielle and I talk about are going to be triggering for some people. And for me, because I switched over to Danielle's way of feeding versus what quote unquote the mainstream is saying, because to me, the proof is in the pudding. I'm going to experiment with it. I'm going to see how it goes. And since switching to the way Danielle feeds versus the way I was told, even in the holistic community of G, they have some arthritis symptoms. The arthritis symptoms have gone down. Their coats are shinier. And again, this went against a lot of the mainstream talking points, but because I have my protocol of how to think versus what to think, I thought, you know what? I know my bumper lanes. I know what the pros and cons are. I'm going to experiment with this and see how my dogs do. And lo and behold, they did even better than I expected in a shorter amount of time than I expected. I was seeing differences within my dogs within a week, and a lot even greater differences as far as their activity levels, their digestion within that 10 to 14 day mark. It was truly amazing. So look out for that episode coming next week. Thank you for tuning into another episode of the Western Hippie Podcast. I'm your host, Michaela, here with my corgis, Willie, Tank, and Daisy. I really appreciate you tuning in, and we will see you and talk to you next week in the interview with Danielle from Detoxify to Purify.